Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Again, as Terry says, it's a great honour to be here with you and share the time. And what I found for Sorsen's presentation was actually, if I could have asked for a feed into our discussion, I could not have asked for a better one. The esteemed panel we've got is made up of, I'm going to call them up in the order you can see, is Phil Witts, who's the Chief Operating Officer of ATEIS. You know, met him briefly on a Zoom meeting and very impressed with his level of knowledge, understanding, and I think we're going to find a real stimulating area from that. Pete Stephenson, who again most of you will know in the region, been around a long time. We joined the fire service together. So our history is how many years old? 1982 is when we joined. Okay. Then I'm going to ask Lana to come up, who brings the fire protection side of stuff to this discussion. Again, very impressed with her in our meeting, and I'm looking forward to you sharing some of her knowledge. Last but by no means least is Tarek Assil, okay, working from the facilities management side of things. And then when you look at Sorsen's presentation, you'll understand why I say that it's a really important. Thank you for coming. Because one of the things that Sorsen touched on really was the human factors. And I want you to bear that in mind as we go through our discussion. Now, we talked briefly about how we're going to run the discussion, and we decided that the occupancy phase for us, we recognise occupancy runs from the time that the building starts right the way through till it's full occupancy. We're just going to concentrate on what after the handover. So when we put our people inside, so we're tailoring it into there, which is why you can see that I say about the human factors. So I'm going to sit down, because I like to sit down and ask you, how do you see the challenges? I'm going to come to you, Phil, first, with the occupancy phase, especially under the human side of things.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Okay, it's a huge topic. We've only got 25 minutes, I guess, so I think obviously we'll dive straight into the important parts from our side. I think as a fire and safety, life safety manufacturer, and for all the life safety manufacturers over there, I can speak on their behalf. We spend millions on R&D to make the technology as good as it can be. Yeah. Then there's a huge investment in design and approvals and civil defense approvals, etc., to make sure that the system, when it goes into the building, is fit for purpose and is as good as it can be. After occupation, then you have human beings involved with different habits and different levels of knowledge. So I think from my side, there are two areas where it needs focus, and that's number one, the trained personnel within a multiple occupancy building particularly. So let's say the security personnel, the receptionists, and how they are trained to handle a fire situation in terms of, let's say, a simple procedure like silencing a fire system. Yeah. One of the important things with the fire alarm is that when it goes off, it's the inhabitants actually really take notice of it and treat it like an emergency. If you keep getting alarms and they're not handled in a quick way, then the fire alarm starts to get ignored, and that's a very, very dangerous situation. So number one is the training of the personnel to handle the situation swiftly, so that the occupants of the building recognize that when there's an alarm, it's serious. And number two, I think after the system's gone in, it's the maintenance of that system from the AMC companies. And you know, we've got an FM expert on the panel, but like I said, the systems are fantastic, they're designed, the technology's there, but they're only as good as how they're looked after and used after installation and after occupation, yeah?
Thank you, Phil. I think that's a classic feed for Tarek.
Yeah. Sorry.
No. It works. As we said in our previous discussions, you know, the topic will flow and we'll go. And I think it's a lovely feed for you to take to talk about the FM side of things.
So thank you for highlighting this. This is actually always on the handover stage when we take over any new buildings. It's always the okay, there's going to be a design and there's going to be an installations and testing, commissioning. When it's come to the reality, it's come where you have detectors next to the kitchen area where the steam is going there. That's one thing. When you get humidity on the staircases where the smoke detector itself not designed to be in such location, that's where you start getting the false alarms. the training, that's the important thing, which always we have to train everyone there to act correctly to any triggered alarms, just to avoid having the sirens or the evacuation. So we have to act before that. Sometimes the cause and effect matrices was not enough for us to act as then when we go to the design. So I will add to Phil's point is the design and installation. Sometimes it go very conservative sometimes, which is causing later on that the fire the trigger is going to be so much to the point that it will not be even helpful on the rear fire. So that's first thing. And the second is when you connect multiple panels, we have this in the complexes, it start getting the integration issues. So we need smarter systems coming. And the third challenge we have on the old buildings where you have still the conventional panels, then you need to go and search the whole zone for the red lights where the fire is there. So that's also when alarm is there, it's, you silence it for just to keep it silent. And you know it's 1 minute or 30 seconds going to cost life in a real fire. So this is mainly our challenge in FM. We're trying always to keep it of our top priorities. For sure, the evacuation routes, the all these the daily things, which is civil defense always helping on enforcing such things, but they come and visit regularly. But we need to keep it safe on daily basis.
And again, it builds on, again, from what Phil's saying, and you talk about some of the old systems and new systems, and we'll come back to innovation as we go forwards. But again, it's about the design of the systems that we're putting in place, and that leads me into our middle two. I'm going to come to Lana first.
Right, so good morning, everyone. I have a fire modeling background. So to me, especially on this topic, there's two things that we need to consider. Up until the building's handed over, everyone's done their best to design a very safe system, produce good strategies, everything's as safe as it can be. But I think there's a missing element, which is the handover part, and you want to have the client, the building owners, have some sort of a closeout documentation, kind of help them understand moving forward how to maintain the building, how to look after the systems, what are the things they need to keep an eye out from. So that's one aspect of this. The other thing that comes to mind is, like Tarek mentioned, different systems in place. So if you've got a stair pressurization system in the building, you've got smoke control, parking garage, it's making sure when they all run together during an emergency, the system itself can handle it, and the required pressures are met. The building is as safe as it can be during an emergency.
Perfect. And that again leads me to Pete.
Thank you, Bob, and good morning, everyone. I've been very busy jotting notes down from the first presentation and just what's been discussed on stage, but I like to term the occupation phase the in-use phase, and that's some of the little notes I've been making. It's obviously the longest phase, as Lana mentioned. Hopefully by the time the consultants and the design teams, the construction teams, the assumption is at handover, the building is perfect. We then move into a phase which can be sort of 80–90% of the entire building's life cycle, where on a daily basis, the risk profile within the building will change. As an example, the building I live in, residential, but it started to become more Airbnb. So people aren't there long-term residents, so they bring in different materials, different attitudes, don't know the building layout, etc. So that's a risk profile change. The room we're in here today, 24 hours ago, this was probably empty. There's a lot of things been set up. There are more people in here now. So the risk profile has changed. And I think that's one of the things that we make assumptions that the building management is good. The handover was good. Then Lana mentioned that is absolutely critical, that all the systems are there when the building is occupied. And certainly for the larger projects, you may see a phased occupation. So as the building is still under construction, people start to occupy, businesses want to open, and again, the risk profile will always be changing.
I think, Pete, you hit on a really key area. It's the risk assessment, and the fact that risk assessment is undertaken it's not a one-stop shop. It needs to be continually done.
Yeah.
So we react to things that change. So the occupancy numerically changing, we need to look at our risk profile. The fact that your building has changed from being purely residential to Airbnb, we know there's a different type of clientele and transient, so they're not familiar with the building. Okay, so I'm probably going a little bit off a topic here, and I told you I wouldn't throw you a curveball, but I might. One of the things that, again, that I really want to think closely about is when we talk about the occupancy, is the nature of the people and their lack of understanding of the building and the passive and the active fire protection that's built into the building. And what challenges do we face in, especially the FM side of things, the design is the design, the engineering side, we've done that bit. So the FM and then the installation of the fire alarms and dealing with those. How do we factor in that change of occupancy, you know, the demographics of it, the diversity?
Yeah. So, changing in you are in the UAE here experiencing, you have over 190 nationalities, so they have a different, cultures. So especially with going to the cooking, using bukhur and even other activities, making smoke. So that's mainly affecting the system. So that's one area. Second area in regulations is being upgraded every now and then. So for example, using the cylinders LPGs, it's now being regulated as per the safety system in the building. So you prohibit it by the authorities, but then you'll find people sneaking those, cylinders. So you need to keep a security or a camera just watching who's getting this LPG then. Some people, they will even make a big drama about this because they used to cook in a way, and you have now to we have many experiencing that people, they are not able to open the door when there's an alarm in their apartments, and that's risking the whole building. So what we need to do, a civil defense officer with all their helps, they knock the door, they talk to them as an official, and they tell them it's not your. They explain to them how it should be. You're part of a community. You cannot just don't open the door. But if there is a real fire, so we because this tenant couldn't open, didn't understand the connections, we have to evacuate the building. So we don't know if there is a real fire, so I cannot take this risk. So that's the culture, understanding. Doing drills is very important just for people to understand there. And again, the big challenge is the false alarm. That's...
Most definitely. And it's trying to get people to react to the false alarms or the alarm activation correctly.
Yeah.
And that comes down to training. And we talked about it, we touched on it again. With training, it's just like the FM teams, your building management teams. But also, as you go into an occupancy, as a firefighter, I go into a hotel, the first thing I do is I look at where the fire exits are, I look at my routes in and out. But that's because that's inbred, that's inherent in me. Okay. Other people, when they go into their home, they feel they're safe. With the change in the regulatory reform order back in the UK, again, it changed the dynamics of the way we see things. If we don't challenge the people that lock their door or block their doors open, that can break down the passive fire protection. Okay, so Phil, just again, some of the innovation we talked about before about the way you can tailor your alarms, I think is quite interesting to come up with now.
Sure, and like we said, different people have different habits, but also different nationalities have different ways of using their apartment or villa or whatever it might be. So here, particularly, Bahur, and the scented incense is burned regularly. Now, you've got somebody in their home generating smoke. And then you have a smoke detector, okay? So if you've got somebody regularly generating smoke and you have a smoke detector, unless some action is taken, the smoke detector is going to trigger the alarm. This is going to be a daily occurrence, and the other residents in that building are going to end up ignoring the alarm. So there is technology available from manufacturers to have certain facilities within their products to have settings for Bahur smoking, so that it will ignore a specific time period. But it's not just Bahur, there's many other things, like you mentioned cooking and steam and smoke from the kitchen. the technology is there, that the system can be adapted either during a specific time period or permanently without actually physically changing the equipment. You can use the intelligence within the system. So obviously, the system is signed off on the initial design by the civil defense and all the authorities, but that's not to say it has to stay like that forever. If we find that the habits of the inhabitants are causing an issue, then it's possible to go back and get it reapproved with slightly different cause and effect and slightly different timings and things like that, which will filter the majority of the nuisance alarms. Yeah.
And I love the term nuisance alarms. And I can see Lana nodding her head in agreement, so I'm going to come to you for comment on that as well.
I mean, that's a very good point. So I think at the end of the day, if your space, say it's a building, if it's a mall, whatever your building is, if its nature of occupancy changes, if the risks have changed, I think the proactive thing would be either the building or the client coming back to a consultant or the authorities themselves and asking them for an upgrade, a revision, review the existing strategies, look at the changes that have happened, see if the codes give you a better way to protect. And my mic died. I think it's breaking up.
Yeah.
It's an evolving documentation process. You keep looking at the building during periods, you maintain it. So that's my stance on it.
Again, I can see Pete nodding away and smiling, so I'm going to come to you as well.
Yeah, I'm actually going to just sort of digest in what's been said there, and I think there's a very strong role for enforcement in building safety. Mentioning some buildings you go to, say if it's a very strong brand hotel, the guest experience, the assumption is everything is safe. So you're not going to question blocked exits and such like. In a residential building with risk profile, you may get something like an electric scooter kept within the corridor. That is a big issue, potentially. But we don't really understand how bad things are until we get an incident. And by that point, it's far too late. And we accept that if we speed, if we park on a restricted area, we'll get a fine. I think within the culture in the UK, I was an enforcement officer and I've been involved in many prosecutions. We would actually bend over backwards, and Bob was in the same fire authority as myself. We would bend over backwards not to actually take people to court and fine them. Whereas if the culture was we went into a building in the UK and there's a door closer missing or a very obvious breach, you get fined. I'm not talking huge fines, but almost bring in an acceptable fine level, and you get X number of points. When you go over a certain threshold, then you are in big trouble. And I think that when buildings are in use, I think that is very critical.
And I think you hit on a really valid point. Sorry, I'll come to you in a minute, Tarek. But I think because that's people's risk awareness isn't there. They don't see the risk. For example, I was working at a university back in the UK, and we were going to do some support for the students, and a member of staff picked a fire extinguisher up and wedged the fire door open in front of me. So I picked it up and I put it back. So she picked it up and put it back in front of the door. I said, you can't do that. Well, you always do that. Otherwise the students can't get through. I said, it's illegal. I said, because of this, this and this. Oh, that's fine, don't worry about it. We've got some wedges coming, we'll wedge the door open with that in a minute. And I said, it's even worse. And that's when I come down to the fact of making people aware of what the risks are and how their actions can compromise everything you've designed, everything your team manages, everything your facilities, your systems work with. So how do we think we can overcome some of that, Tarek?
Yeah, that's awareness mainly. That's I think authorities doing a very good job on this, and we as facilities management, we have, especially in the communities, it's always there to have this events and awareness within the communities and send those announcements, and don't take it like just for sake of ticking the boxes for health and safety. That should be always there. So is there any bad activities or wrong activities happening from facilities management, this should be notified, as you know, the naughty boards sometimes on the building. So we're doing this. If someone is keeping his bicycles on the corridors, that's very common, that they're kids. all this is being announced to the tenants. So now with technology, with listing all your tenants on the CRM systems, you can easily reach to all your tenants and just tell them about the wrong activity they're doing, and then announce the monthly announcement or newspapers about the safety of the communities and the good events for the kids and Halloween and all this along with that. So at least you can make it just acceptable for them. So the second is having those checklists. All the FMs is required in many contracts, even contractually, for them to do a monthly, if not weekly, checks for all those the safety systems, the exits, and that's a mandatory. The CO system, all those systems should be checked. And these scores is actually easy to implement. And if there is a weekly, and actually there's now third parties coming on from civil defense because they're very busy, so they need to allocate this. And that is coming on the monthly STIFA now, but I think it's going to be like more frequent inspections to help everyone to enforce the regulations.
We're running low on time now. I'm down to like 35 seconds, so I'm normally pretty good at keeping time, so we haven't done too bad. But again, I think we can see, based on what we heard from Sourcen and what we've discussed here, that all the design factors that we've got in place, all the designs and everything, the human behaviour is what can compromise that. And then that relies on our esteemed colleagues from the civil defence to step forward and do the rescue. Education, education, education is probably one of the strongest things we can take away from this. And one of the things on the back of the FM side of things that I was really impressed with here last year is the way the AI was being developed by civil defence. And the fact that you could communicate to people, bear in mind you said 190 different nationalities here. You could communicate to them in their own language. So the safety message, the communication could be given to them quickly, and that will speed up their reaction time, their response time, which I think is really important. I would like to thank my panel. I've enjoyed the discussion, as you can tell, so hopefully you've enjoyed it as well.